All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Hey, thanks everyone for joining us at Election Essentials with Jonathan Nikkila and Christian Esperias from Our Turn Action Network. We're super excited to have you again. This is week 8, I guess, for me not getting a haircut while Christian maintains his nice hair going on there. But I'll catch up eventually. Supposedly hair salons are supposed to open in my town on Monday, so I can get back and finally trim up the side of my head. But we appreciate you all being on. We hope to continue to be something that's valuable for you. And to that note, just a reminder about what this is all about. The subhead says it all. We're training advocates to impact elections. It's something Christian and I do professionally, and we'd love to see issue advocates become electoral advocates. And we're hopeful that this series will help you do that. Reminder: it's nonpartisan. This isn't issue focused. We're open to anyone who needs help about advocating for issues and how to involve an electoral component to make you a more rounded advocate and more effective. Additionally, we're going to focus on really fundamental topics. Like this week, we're going to talk about the basics of budgeting. If you don't have a lot, how do you be effective politically? And Christian will go over some more of the topics we have currently planned here next. Also, we're going to do a little bit of a weekly news and insights so that you can hear about what's going on in the political world and find ways to connect it back to the work that you're doing. And then what it isn't. Of course, we could say more. Got to keep it somewhat condensed. Plus, we've learned from great people. There are lots of great people out there who have other insights. And we know we're not always, the stuff we say, there might be different perspectives. And we're humble enough about it to take feedback. So please let us know if you ever have different perspectives than what we lay out here. So that's sort of the rundown of what this webinar series is about. And Christian, why don't you talk about the sessions we have coming up?
Yeah, so this week we're going to learn about budgeting. Jonathan's going to walk us through that. And if you weren't here for the previous 2 weeks, I think there's a lot of great material there on how to make sure you run an endorsement process that really speaks to whether or not a candidate is on your side on the issues, and also how to determine if a candidate is viable. And we have a few more weeks left. We're going to talk about tactics, we're going to talk about the legal stuff, and we're going to talk about polling, which is my personal favorite. All this is the brainchild of Jonathan. He has an amazing book that he'll talk about in just a minute. But this is just the beginning. And Jonathan and I were just talking about people getting back to us and sharing some feedback on what they like, what they didn't like, and also topics they'd like to cover. So if you have any feedback on what you like, didn't like, what you want to hear more of, send it on over to us. It's really helpful here. Really, really want this to be a tool that people can really use. And so again, if there's any topic you want to learn about, let us know. We have a few more weeks to go through here. And so next thing I want to talk about, and as Jonathan mentioned, is like who we are. The reason we're doing this is, as Jonathan mentioned, like combined, we have about almost 3 decades of experience between us. And we aren't the end all be all of the campaigns, but we do want to be able to share some best practices we've heard over our time doing this work. I've been doing this for a decade, and so wanted to share the question we wanted to share with everyone here is, what is the first campaign we've worked on? And so this actually is pivotal to why I got into electoral politics. I began my work as an intern with President Obama's 2010 push for Medicare, for the healthcare bill. And that's where I got my start and became an intern, and then officially got hired on with the Obama campaign. So I started that, which is shocking to say it's been over 10 years now since I started doing that. And the funny thing, and something I want to note here that's going to lead to what we're talking about a little later on, is when I signed up to be an Obama intern, or actually a volunteer, I signed up for about like 10, 11 weeks in a row back when he ran in 2008. And I would sign up to go to phone banks or to go over to Nevada and help the caucus over there. And for 8 weeks in a row, I did not show up, even though I volunteered myself. So anyone out there who has a volunteer base or has a membership base and they think people are flakes and they'll never come through. I was one of those guilty parties that wasted your time and lied to you and said I would show up. And so just give those people a little grace, because eventually they come around and get active and start volunteering and become a super volunteer. But that's a little bit of who I am. Jonathan, what is the first campaign that got you really involved into politics and advocacy?
So I'm going to do this one a little different and not say the first professional job I had in the campaign, but the first type of issue campaign I got involved with was when I was in high school, junior, senior year, and the city was going to build an overpass connecting the two parts of our town. I was on the proverbial wrong side of the track, so we had to deal with the trains. With busiest freight line in the country goes through my town, and they were going to build a new overpass, and it wasn't going to be where my neighborhood wanted it. It wasn't as convenient as we wanted. Plus, they were going to shut railroad crossings down as part of the plan. So my high school history teacher who lived near me got all fired up and got a big group of people together to rally around petitioning the city to move the overpass to a different location. And I was even out there with a clipboard, walking door to door to have people sign the petition. And so that was the first real political thing I did formally. And then my high school history teacher used that platform. By the way, we didn't win. The overpass got built where we didn't want it. But he used that platform to run for city council the next cycle. And then lo and behold, I ran for city council, I don't know how many years later, and he's still on it. So he's on it, I'm on it, and we both got our start because we didn't like where an overpass was going. So that was my.
You voted yet to tear down that overpass?
No, I use it all the time now. I won't lie. It wasn't a bad idea. Don't tell. Although all the city council members that did that are gone, or not on council anymore. So, but yeah, I work at 50 Can. I've done this for 18 years. I'm a member of my local city council as well. And Christian mentioned the Guide to Political Advocacy, which leads people who are working for issue groups or part of issue-based advocacy, leads them through how to be involved in elections. You can buy that by hard copy from the 50 Can site, or you can download a free PDF of it as well. So with that, this week's webinar, how to be effective politically on a budget. First of all, we're going to talk about what's interesting, of course, like we do every week. But we're going to tackle 3 main points about the budget. First, understand how candidates win. 2, look at your assets. And 3, assess then finally what you can do affordably. And then hopefully we'll have time for Q&A at the end. Just a reminder, on your Zoom interface, there's a Q&A button you can click. And please, continue to submit the questions throughout the presentation so that we're ready to roll when we get to that part of it. So, Christian, I'm really curious to hear, because I'm not sure I know much about this. What is your interesting story of the week?
So what I found interesting is that the Biden campaign has staffed up heavily and restructured their digital team. They brought on people from Beto O'Rourke's Senate campaign. They've brought on people from Elizabeth Warren's campaign. And the reason I find that this is so interesting is that it tells us where, in this new COVID area, how they plan to reach out to voters. And I think this also speaks to how a lot of fundraising is done digitally, and also how a lot of messaging is done digitally. To quote Joe Biden, who I had the pleasure of seeing a bunch of times when I worked on the Obama campaign, which is he would always say that his value is, don't tell me what your values are, show me your budget, and that will tell me your values. And so I'm putting that back on them. Their budget is telling me that they value digital a great deal, which I find really interesting. There's been we've run a number of random controlled tests here, experiment on digital with some of our partners here, and seeing how effective or not effective they are. And so I'm really curious on, is this a mechanism to raise money? Is it a mechanism to micro-target messaging to specific demographics? Also found this incredibly interesting because our own Students for Education Reform, our former digital director, is now Joe Biden's deputy media director. So shout out to John Hebert, who's over there now and representing us very proudly. But I think this is going to impact us locally, like on low ballot races. If there is a big switch going to digital, I wonder what that means for us in terms of, do we still spend the same amount of money on field? Do we still spend the same amount of money on mail, TV, and things of that nature? Or, is this the future? Or should we be reallocating a large portion of our money to digital, and in what ways? If it's only meant for fundraising, then I think lower races like us shouldn't probably get involved, because we're not really doing fundraising. We're trying to do persuasion and turn out the vote. So I'm really interested in learning more about, who they brought on and what their game plan is. What's your take on digital investments on campaigns?
I think it's inevitable, and I'm really curious to see what kind of innovation comes out of this. Although I will say, I hope CFH doesn't become the new jargon. Is that going to be the new jargon that we've invented for ourselves to sound important? CFH, campaign from home. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
we could use less jargon in the world, but hopefully
I completely agree. I think our sector is the most guilty of jargon.
I will say one other thing. This isn't a commentary on digital. It's probably very unhelpful, but just interesting observation that until the early 20th century, it was considered distasteful for presidential candidates to campaign in person and to barnstorm around the country. So that's what we're returning to, where the candidate stays at home and lets surrogates handle the campaigning around the country. I don't know. Anyway.
So I think that's fascinating, because one critique I had of specifically Democratic campaigning is that, for example, they'll have President Obama go down to Miami, and he'll have 30,000 people there ravenously applauding him, and he brings out someone like Jennifer Lopez, and I always thought that was so backwards. You already have 30,000 people there for you. Jennifer Lopez fans aren't going to come out and sit in the heat and to hear President Obama speak. I always thought they had it inverted. You should have a Jennifer Lopez concert and then bring President Obama out, because that's when you're really talking to unlikely voters. You're not preaching to the choir.
Well, maybe we can add celebrity endorsements to our tactics list next week, and we can opine about.
Let's opine about that. I got a lot of thoughts on that.
So for me this week, this actually happened yesterday, I think, or Friday. I can't remember now exactly what day it was. I'm losing track of time, but robocalls get their day in Supreme Court in Politico. It's sort of complicated, but the point was you cannot use robocalls to dial cell phones, but the government, being the government, carved its own exception out to say, oh, but we can. It's okay for us to do it. So the political consultant said, what's going on here? And they challenged the government either to say government shouldn't be able to do it, or to say you should open it up to political speech too, because that's important. And so the Supreme Court is hearing this, and I don't know where it's going to go. The website scotusblog.com, which I know a lot of people read, which is interesting, and they do a great job covering Supreme Court. They said that just kind of my summary of reading the blog from the hearing was that the Supreme Court members did express some skepticism that the ban or the exception was constitutional, but none of them really hid their disdain for robocalls. So, I guess we'll see where that goes. But I would just say, and by the way, the text messaging apps that we use for political work, I think this is somewhat tied into them, because if the Supreme Court sort of rules in favor of robocalls, it might make it harder to regulate the text messaging that happens as well. I would just say, text messaging or robocalls and text messaging are super cheap. It annoys the hell out of people, but people keep doing it because it works, and it's a great way to contact folks in an efficient manner. I will say my old boss and mentor hated phones just as a tactic, so I didn't do them as much. But I do have a poll for people here. I just want to ask people, have you been involved in a political project where you ran robocalls? One thing I would just tell people, if you're going to use robocalls, be very careful about checking the rules that are involved, because there's very strict FCC and sometimes state rules about when you identify who's calling, providing callback information, what numbers you can call, and if you're off and you do it wrong, there can be really serious fines. So just don't work with some fly-by-night vendor if you're going to use robocalls. Make sure you work with someone who's a pro. And just so you know, I'm actually surprised here. I'll end the poll now, but I actually was surprised. There's only like 3 people said that they that said that they have been part of robocalls. So I was going to make fun of the people on this call, say you're part of the problem in this world. But apparently not as many people are as much of a problem as I thought. So.
Look, there's a reason why people still use it. I would love for someone to run an RCT on it and figure out how effective it is when it comes to name ID. Because especially now where hardly anyone has, a landline multiplied by who checks their answering machine. I think you're targeting a very specific demographic who has both of those things. And so, but yeah, we've done robo-dials, so I'm part of the problem, and we've also done the hustle and the relay text bank thing. So guilty on all fronts.
Yeah. All right. Well, so our topic this week is we're gonna focus on being effective politically on a limited budget, because we know that not everyone has all the dollars, and I think a lot of people, when they talk about political activity, I found they just shut down when they get to the part about money, because they think, well, I don't have $500,000, and yeah, okay, if you're in certain states, there's different, but ultimately you can be effective at any budget level, and money should never be your excuse. Of course, you want to have a bigger budgets allow you to do more things. But what I would tell people is the difference between doing nothing and just doing a little bit is just a significant increase of your effectiveness as an advocate. So it doesn't have to be as expensive as you think, and just doing something is way, 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 way better than nothing. So we're gonna talk about 3 main points. 1, how candidates win. That's important to remember when you're assessing how you can help them. 2, look at your assets to identify how you line up with what candidates need. And 3, then let's look at some affordable options for you as an advocate. So first thing, there we go. Okay, the first thing is how candidates win. So and I have a poll question here. We're going to ask people, what is the most important thing a candidate needs to focus on in order to win? So we've got a lot of options for you this week. Is it fundraising, door knocking, yard signs, endorsements, running ads, kissing babies, good messaging, or good personality? So, and yes, all the above. I didn't make that an answer because that would have been too easy. So I want to see where people are going. Fundraising has got an early lead. Good messaging is catching up. Ads, door knocking. All right, we'll give people another minute here, or another second.
Some people chimed in on running ads, and I call that the Little Caesars pizza theory, which is we can all agree Little Caesars isn't good pizza, but everyone knows that you can buy it for $5 and it's hot and ready. And so I think there's something to that. If you run enough ads enough times, it seeps through your conscience, especially in a low ballot race where it's all about name ID.
Yeah, well, I don't buy your assertion that it's not good pizza, but it's very popular in my household. But yeah, the ads are very effective. All right, so overwhelmingly people said fundraising. So a few little door knocking, a little bit of ads, a little bit of good messaging. Overwhelmingly fundraising, over half the people that voted. And you know what? I get it. I get why people want to say that, but I'm just going to say straight, and I'm going to cheat and put them all in one and say it's all about votes. So I threw you guys a little loop there with the question, but it's all about winning votes. And so we are going to talk about how fundraising contributes to that. But right? But some people forget that when they want to help a candidate, they have their view of how they want to be helpful or what they care about, and they forget that the candidate is focused on 51%. And if you're taking up a candidate's time and you're not getting them to that 51%, a good candidate will be frustrated with you. A good candidate will want you to go away. If you're contributing in some way to that 51%, a good candidate will be very grateful and happy and appreciative of you. So, we talked about endorsements last week a little bit, or maybe no, it was the first week. We talked about endorsements and filling out questionnaires, and we said candidates will only fill out that endorsement. Ultimately, most of them will only fill it out if they see value for their campaign and filling it out, and you have to show them that value. And so that's part of what we're going to do today. We're going to go through the 3 buckets where candidates could potentially find value that would help them get to that 51%. And those three buckets are finances. So that's the first one. That's what most people mentioned. And finances are important because it costs money to speak to voters. People. So there's a lot of hard work to do, and it takes time, takes hours, it takes people. Also, candidates need access to people so that they can win their votes. And then signals. Signals are sent out, and those are messages that voters get about a candidate through whatever means that creates an impression of the candidate, hopefully positive, that the candidate wants, like Little Caesars, like $5 cheap pizza, So candidates want to have that signal about them that sends people a positive message. So Christian, I mean, do you think that's, are there any other buckets you'd add, or what do you think about that?
No, this is absolutely perfect. This is when I had my days of campaign manager, this is the number one thing I would tell candidates. They'd come with all these harebrained ideas about, I'm going to skywrite my name over the city, and so everyone will know me, and so on and so forth. And I would just tell people, look, if it's not going to get you money, if it's not going to get you votes, and if it's not going to send signals or amplify your message, you're not doing it. And this is really the fundamentals to winning, because all these lead up to that 50+1% you need to win. And so in our positions that we're in, whether we're running independent expenditures or in some states we can actually directly coordinate with candidates, depending on wherever you're running. The fundamental question you have to ask yourself is, what's the unique value add that I'm bringing to this campaign? And what of these three things am I helping with? How am I helping them get more money? How am I helping them get more votes or volunteers? And how am I amplifying their message to people who otherwise wouldn't hear it? And I think that's really important for the fundamental grounding you're doing, to know whether or not you're using your money and resources wisely.
Yep. Absolutely. So now, okay, weird. All right, so now we're going to look at your assets. We're going to assess how do I know that I can help a candidate? And really, this can be any group of people. This can be an organization. It doesn't have to be an organization, but just a group of people. We're going to take a look at how you can benefit a campaign. And first of all, we're going to ask a poll question. In our three buckets, we have finances, people, signal. We want to ask you, what does the support of Emily's List mean for a candidate? So in your mind, what would be the main bucket that Emily's List does for a candidate? We'll give you just a minute, and then I'm going to turn it over to Christian to sort of chime in on what his opinion is on that.
Yeah, Emily's List. If I was forced to pick one of these three, I would go with finance. I would go with finance. And so my thinking behind here is that Emily's List is a wonderful organization that does candidate training and gets people ready. And especially in some of the races that are swing districts or really have the nation or state's attention, Emily's List will come in and they'll train you to be a good candidate. They'll give you their donor list so you can phone bank from it, and they'll also give you a campaign manager. They'll give you a whole campaign staff. And so what I would position that behind is more finance than anything else, just because I think, while many of us know who Emily's List is, my mom is a vote by mail person, votes down ballot just because it's her civic duty. If she got a piece of mail that says endorsed by Emily's List, I don't think she would know who that is.
Yeah, and in our poll, people are saying that not very many people thought finances. I certainly went to finances too, and we'll talk more about that toward the end, about what their view of that is. But yeah, I think so. That's interesting that people view it that way. So obviously, for Christian and I, we saw it as more of a finances thing. So let's talk about finances. Again, I want to equate finances to communication. Really, especially if you're a challenger in an open seat, name ID is so highly valuable. And if you're a challenger, you don't have that name ID, and the only way you can get it is to go out and put your word out. And so if you're a challenger, you have to do a lot of fundraising, and in states with really restrictive campaign finance laws, you have to do a lot of fundraising to get the amount of money that needs to combat the name ID of incumbents in particular. So when people talk about fundraising, people might be really cynical about it, but it is allowing a message about a candidate to get out. That's really what finances are. And, and that's something that was put into sort of our legal frame of view back in 1976 with Buckley v. Vallejo, the sort of original campaign finance case that linked free speech in elections to spending money. So it said you can't put limits on what candidates can spend. So what are ways that you can give to the finances of a candidate? You can make direct contributions, and that's through different means, like yourself writing a check. Some states allow you to do bundling, which is a group of you get together, you all write checks, and then you deliver all those checks together to the candidate, so the candidate knows it's coming from this group of people together. Or you can start a PAC, a political action committee, which is a group of people who write checks to a political organization registered with the state or local government, and then that organization makes donations to candidates. So there's a couple ways to do that. You can do in-kind donations. Basically, you do stuff for candidates. Pay for food at an event is usually a pretty typical one. Just things that then the candidates don't have to pay for. And then also independent expenditures. So that's something else. And that just means you are actually communicating directly to the voters for the candidate. So while you can, but you can't talk to the candidate, you can't coordinate how that money's being spent. So presumably you're doing it so the candidate has to spend less to do it themselves. That's the idea, although again, you have to follow legal processes. And this is obviously the most costly of those three for the most part, because you have to do the whole communication yourself. But it can be super targeted. We'll talk about independent expenditures in more depth probably next week. So guiding questions. So how do you know if you are able to help in this way? Like, hey, I only have $100. Does that matter? Well, let's look through a few things and know, do your finances, do you have the ability to make an impact with your finances in a race? The first thing is look at campaign cost. And this is where I really want people to who might say, oh, I just have $100, or I can just get 5 friends and $500. Well, if you're talking about a school board race, some of these local school board races or local municipal race in like a medium to small size city, they may not be spending as much money as you think. I know I'm in a smaller town than most people, but like in my town, if a school board member spends $10,000, they're like breaking the bank. And again, I know that's not LA where they spend millions, but if you're in those, if you're looking to support a race and they spend anywhere from $0 to $100,000, if you can get some friends together and raise $1,000, that's a big deal for that candidate. So don't look down on what you can give, or if you can give $100, that's a big deal to a candidate in some of these smaller races. So definitely look at the campaign cost first before you dismiss your ability to impact, because my guess is you can do more than you think. Next, is it easy to organize people to give money? Getting people to give money is hard. Everyone who does fundraising knows that. So if you want to help a candidate, I want to raise them $2,000. Just so you know, that's going to require a lot of phone calls, a lot of conversations. Are your friends the type that you can easily get together to do this kind of thing? So just think about your network. Think about what it's going to take to hustle to get those people, and assess, do I have the type of friends or colleagues or whatever that are able to do that? Next, legal restrictions. How much can you give? Who can give? For the most part, some states have high limits, some have low, but you'll want to take a look at that. Some places you can write a check from your business, and you can write a check from you to the candidate. So it depends on what states and what they allow. And then lastly, expertise. Do you have the expertise? And this mostly has to do with independent expenditures. So if you don't feel like you have the campaign experience to create a great piece of mail or a great ad to help a candidate, probably better not to do it, because it's probably not going to help the candidate. It maybe just be a lot of waste of effort. So make sure you have the expertise to execute in that way. Christian, is there anything else you would help people with?
I think these are the right guiding questions. The other thing, kind of think outside the box, right? We often think, can I give money? But a lot of things that go unnoticed that are really helpful, especially from the point of view of a campaign manager or a candidate, is resources that isn't money. When I think of of organizations, the main thing I ask, okay, can you max out, whatever a corporation or can contribute? But the second question I ask is, can you hold a fundraiser? Okay, if you can't, can you be a co-host? And just go down the line. But things like office space, like oftentimes it's so hard to find office space for a 3 to 4 month span. And if you have an extra room or part of the office you don't use, that is a great resource that a campaign would love to have.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, even just giving your office for after hours so they can host a meet and greet or a fundraiser, things like that really do. While they don't have a monetary value specifically, like explicitly on them, they are immensely invaluable to campaigns. And the same thing with, like, to your question, that you did organize. If you're a membership organization that you really drive on your members, this is a great way, like host meet and greets to get them to volunteer on their own time for this thing. So these are the right guiding questions we need to be asking ourselves to make sure we're working smarter, not harder, being impactful.
And what I would like to tell people is, like, usually the answer to all these is yes. So when you read through these questions, like, evaluate honestly if you can help. Is it a congressional campaign? Okay, then maybe your $500 isn't as important as other things. But, like, in most cases, the answer is a yes for all these things, that you can make a difference. All right, so Christian, we got another group considered on the other side of the spectrum from Emily's list. I'm guessing that Emily's list and NRA have never endorsed the same candidate before, but I could be wrong. I don't know. So let's ask a group, what does the support of NRA mean for a candidate? So what do people think? And Christian, we talked about this one ahead of time, so I know you got some interesting thoughts. So where do you think they fall? Is there one where they're the biggest on, or is it multiple? What do you think?
Yeah, let me be careful with what I say here. I think
I got it. I wrote it down.
And this is being recorded, so I had to make sure I watch what I say. I think the NRA is the example that most advocacy organizations should, like, follow in the sense of how impactful they are at legislation passing and blocking, but also getting people elected. And the amount of support, whether it's in human voting or in support of ads or in support of giving that candidate direct money or raising money for them. So if I had to pick one here, this is tricky, right? Because an NRA, this is tricky. I would say if it's one over the other, I would say signals. If I had to pick one, just for this reason, while they have a ravenous base of voters who will vote whatever the NRA tells them to do, you might not have enough NRA members in that specific district, right? So that's why it's kind of a trick question in my mind. Also financially, like, some of the best digital ads over the last couple of years have been produced by the NRA. And so, like, when I think of finances, they give a lot of money in terms of ad, but they also bundle money and give a lot of money to you. But I think when you see this, there's two logos I think that, like, if you like them or hate them, they speak volumes to you. I think the first one is NRA, the second one's Planned Parenthood. If you see those logos, it sends a clear message to you no matter what.
Yep. And I was going to say signals. I was going to say people at first, but I think and that's what most people on our poll said. They said signals. So it was a little split too. I mean, but NRA offers many things. And I would just say in my world, even if you're not a member of the NRA, like, the NRA is important for all the hunters where I am. But, like, it just sends a signal about their view, and that's it. That's all I need to hear. So, but the next thing we're going to talk about is people. So people, why are people important? First of all, my notes ahead. So first of all, membership followers. So this is important if your organization has those, for a couple reasons. One is it's a really great way you can give access you give candidate access to those members and followers, because a lot of states have exceptions where you can communicate to membership of an organization about a candidate, and it doesn't count towards campaign finance contributions. So if you have a organization with a decent membership relative to the size of the district, you're saving the candidate a lot of money on having to communicate to those people, because then you can do it for them. So you're giving the candidate that kind of help and direct access to voters, and they're getting it from you. That's fantastic. Another thing you can do with people are house parties. I think these are fantastic. They bring people together. And even if you can just bring 10 people together, that is, so when I think about door knocking, like if I get 10 doors, if I'm knocking and talking, if I get 10 doors in an hour, I'm really hustling. Like that's really efficient. And but if you're telling me you're going to bring 10 people to a living room and I can sit there and I can talk to each of them for an hour, and on top of that, there's a really good chance they all are going to like me because you invited them. So they're more inclined to be supporters. Boy, I'm there. That's a great use of my time as a candidate. So don't underestimate the importance of house parties. Organize a group of 10, 15 people, bring them together. You might do a Zoom call right now, but regardless, I think that's a really great way to bring people together that you could use with your assets. Conventions and meetings. So if you have those conventions and meetings, you get a chance to bring candidates there. If you're a 501c3, you have to be careful about making sure you invite all candidates, but equally. But this is another great place where you have the people and the assets, you're having a meeting, you can let candidates come and get a chance to interact directly with the folks at that situation. And then lastly, volunteering. This is really where I want to encourage people on the people side of things. And the first thing I want to just say is, well, volunteering fills gaps for candidates that are hard work. Like being a candidate is a lot of work. There's a lot of phone calls, a lot of door knocking, and candidates love it when people show up for volunteering, right? Right, Nicholas, when they show up and they come and do it. But it's huge for the candidate. And you might think, oh, I can only get 5 of my friends to volunteer to help knock doors. Are you kidding me? 5 people are going to show up as a candidate? This is awesome. Like seriously, like I'm just loving you. You're like my favorite person ever. You can bring 5 people. And so when we think about those terms, it's not as significant as it maybe needs to be. So you don't have to, don't think it takes any more than that. But volunteers can do lots of stuff. Write letters to the editor, put up signs for the candidate, do phone calls, knock on doors, stuff envelopes, volunteer on election day, organize events for them. It's like almost limitless. And even if it's just you and all you have is a pair of shoes, like get out and do it. Like so easy and candidates love it. So, Christian, I know you have a lot of experience with volunteers. I just think that's so big.
Yeah, I echo everything you just said. The one thing I want to harp on is house parties. I think this is so undervalued and so underutilized. To your point, if you can get 10 people in the room to listen to you speak directly to them, essentially the odds are out of those 10 people, a quarter of them are going to become volunteers. They're going to become, they're going to go host their own house party. It's a multiplying effect. I've seen a few assembly members here in the state of California really grab onto that idea, and it is just been gangbusters for them because of it, and because how party affiliates are connected up and down the state. I've seen, really small district assembly members who otherwise would never be known are now known statewide because they utilize both volunteers and house parties.
Yeah, absolutely. Just, it's so great. I can't tell. So again, do I have the people to help? First of all, the answer is yes. You have the people to help. Get your people out, help candidates. They'll appreciate it. It's an asset you have. But if you want some guiding questions about how effective your people might be, or just to give you some shape to making that determination, do they have passion? That helps, because if they're not fired up about the cause of the candidate, it's gonna be hard to motivate them. So, assess your group. Again, numbers, assess what you realistically have. The great news, you only need one, and that's all you need. You got the numbers, but can I get 5? Can I get 10? Again, 5 to 10 would be really big for a candidate. Time, when are your volunteers available? Are they more available in the mornings, at night, during the day? So that'll affect what the candidate would use them for, or what you would use them for. So you want to assess that. Also, location. I will tell you that candidates will be most impressed, probably not surprised, by people who can vote for them. And that's best for you too, because you want the candidate to get linked to their constituents. You want them to know that these people are people that can vote for them. But if the people can volunteer, that's great too. Candidates still appreciate that and will value your organization. If you have volunteers, maybe they can't vote for the candidate, but they could still help. That's still important too. But I would tell you that location does matter a lot. So keep that in mind. And then just, again, look at your calendar and see what kind of regular meetings you have that you can work them in naturally and not have to create special gatherings. So anyway, so that's guiding questions for looking at your assets with people. And then I got one more organization, and then I know we're going a little long here. I apologize. We'll still stay under an hour, but we're probably not going to make our 45 minutes of the question deadline. But next question is, what does Everytown for Gun Safety / Moms Demand Action, what does the support of that organization, what message does that send to the voters? And or what is that, I'm sorry, what does that value offer to a candidate? So Christian, what do you think?
This is another tough one, right? Like, I think I might have to recuse myself because I used to work for Mayors Against Illegal Guns and partnered with Everytown. I would say the strongest thing they have there is, I want to say people, because it's a very story-based organization and they get a really good narrative out there with op-eds and things of that nature. But I'm going to say signals. This one, like, if you have an endorsement of Everytown, it sends a signal to pretty much every voter that's likely to vote in an election where you stand on that specific issue and to, like, whether you're a champion or not. And so I'm gonna cast my vote as signals.
Yeah, and most people said signals. A few people said people, financial. I would just say that I agree with signals because I think most social groups are signals. And because most social groups don't have like 500 people showing up at their events, but they have many people that support their issue and know what that signal, what that logo means. So I think that's probably right. So, and that's our next category is signals. So how, and really this comes down to an endorsement. When you endorse someone, you're sending a signal. And so we're going to talk first about what are ways that you can send that signal, and then we'll talk about how to decide if your signal is valuable. The first is you can write an op-ed endorsing a candidate. Candidates love that because they can share it on social media, they can share it with their donors. So op-eds are a great way to send that signal. You can do a press release. So that lets the media know. Maybe you can work that into stories. It's also really valuable when if your candidate wins, often the media will recap who supported them, and your issue can be mentioned as one of the issues that was important and help carry your issue after the election. Website, which is basically means that candidates love on their website to put logos of all the organizations that are endorsing them. And I think it just makes them feel good because they like to show momentum. So that's a way that you can help signal to for the candidate. They like to show the volume of people supporting them. And then you can also send signals through a questionnaire. A questionnaire allows a candidate to signal to the people that support you that they're on board with your issue. And also, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, it's also good for your organization because you're able to know where candidates stand. Christian, if a candidate doesn't want your endorsement, what do? What does that tell you? Do you run away? Do you still support them?
It depends on the climate. It really does, right? Like, I think long term, when you have your political cap on, you have to vote for whoever's going to be best on your issue. And if they're better than the alternative, you know they're aligned with your values, but for one reason or another, your issue isn't popular amongst the voting base, you have to be able to self-analyze that and be okay with it.
Yeah, I would be really careful. I agree with that. To me, it just means they're going to be just as difficult when they're elected. So I would tell you they might have a really good reason for it. And Christians, like Christian said, so if you come to a mutual agreement, it's probably good. But if they're sort of reluctant to admit that they know you, I would be wary.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So anyway, guiding questions. So, and honestly, I really want to point to the guiding questions here because I would just tell you the most organizations overstate their value, just like most elected officials think everyone knows who we are and loves us and all these things. Most people overstate their value. So you should ask yourself tough questions like, do I represent a pertinent issue that creates strong opinions? So like we talked about the social issues, that issue sends signals to a lot of people who are very passionate. Does your issue have the same kind of passion that will signal to people that support it? So, look at that first. Second of all, credibility. Are you strongly trusted with core voters? And if you don't have a track record, you might not. So look at that. Are people gonna care what I say? And then, do you have a strong following? So are there a lot of people waiting to hear what you're gonna say? Are they looking for that endorsement? Are they curious what your opinion is? So take a look at those three issues, and that helps you understand if your endorsement can offer some value to the candidate. So we're at the end. We're here now. We're gonna talk about how to actually spend money. And the great news is we've got a budget for everybody. We've got a budget for everybody in there. And wrong button. I'm gonna ask you guys a question. Election budget. The people on this poll. We'll keep it anonymous, so you don't have to. We don't know which. I'm going to just straight up. I don't know who answered the poll. It's not public, but I'm just saying I'll kind of keep it on the down low here in terms of specific numbers. But we just want to get a sense of where are folks coming in on this. What kind of budget are people talking about having? And we've got some 10,000, 25, 50 plus. A lot of people who are up to that 10 number. It looks like a lot of budget conscious people here. All right. Okay, so mostly we got some 10 up to 10, a few of the higher end. So in that 5 to 10 range. Okay, interesting. All right, so that's good to know. So you know what? The great news about that poll question is we got an answer for everybody. We got something to sell you. So just like the car lot, I got something to sell you. You tell me your budget, I'll give you a car. So we're gonna do that for you. All right, so finding affordable options. We're gonna go through some different levels. We got 0, 5,000, 10,000, 25, and then 50 plus. So first category is 0. You have $0. You got your pockets are empty. First thing I want to tell you before I get into this from a legal perspective, everything I list here are going to be things that are going to have to be on your personal time, which can still help you in your job, but you're not going to be able to do these while your organization is paying your time. It doesn't matter who you work for. Anyone can do these things. You just have to do it when you're off the clock. But the great news is door knocking, helping the candidate costs $0. Getting a group of friends to go help a candidate costs $0. House parties, well, okay, you got to buy some chips and salsa maybe, but you can handle that. $0. Making endorsements, $0. And actually your organization could do that in some cases. And it's infinite. You can endorse as many people as you want. So these are some great items that cost nothing that everyone can do. Christian, anything else you'd add to that list?
No, I think we covered it here and in the previous about how we can do in-kind donations. This is a long list of what you can do with no money that has a great impact and candidates would love.
Yeah. And if we go up to the 5,000 number, and just so you know, as we go up, you can obviously do all the things that were in the lower category, but just kind of throw out some other things that you can do with money. Boost social media posts. Super rough figures. I'm not a media vendor. We work with them, so I have obviously a rough idea of what things cost. About $30 per 1,000 impressions. So if you make that endorsement, put a few $100 behind a social media ad and get that out. Super efficient. You can focus on key demographics with those ads. You can talk to exactly the people that care about the message that you're going to deliver them. So that's really efficient. You can also do larger volunteering efforts, and this is where I would encourage people in that $5,000 level for campaigns. Volunteering is so important because one, candidates really appreciate that, but also hearing from other people, I think, is second only to hearing from the candidate themselves about persuading people to vote. And costs, depending on this, how nice your flyers are and stuff, it costs 50 cents to $1 each. You can pay your walkers if you want to, and phone bankers, $10 to $15 an hour, or just make it a $50 flat shift fee. And then you have to remember now that we're in the money spending area, you're gonna have to account for your time too. So I just kind of thought loosely it's gonna take us at least as long to plan a volunteer shift as it costs to do it, to get the volunteers together and get the materials ready. So that 6 hours may or may not be exactly where you would come in, but just don't forget when you're budgeting to budget for the amount of time that you're going to need to do it. So again, to me, Christian, I don't know what you think, but like if I had $5,000, I would pick like maybe one race or two races and do them really well and not try to get spread too thin. I would try to make a big impact in a couple.
I couldn't agree more. And I love that you said focus on key demographics. Like, obviously $5,000 in the governor's race in California, we looked at the numbers last week, wouldn't amount to much. But $5,000 in a state senate, assembly, even medium-sized school district would make a huge impact, especially if you focus on a key demographic. And yeah, $5,000 goes a lot when you have door knockers. And according to data, there's nothing more effective to persuading and turning people out to vote than someone having a face-to-face conversation with them. So this is where I would put my money is in targeting messaging directly to the demographic or knocking on doors.
Yeah, and COVID makes it harder, but I still think you can do it. Like we talked about with the Biden campaign or the Wisconsin Democratic Party last week, people are finding ways to make volunteers still matter. So, okay, all right. Well, you got a surprise check in the mail for another $5,000. You're up at that $10,000 category. You're just, you don't know what to do with it. Well, we'll spend it for you. We got some ideas. So I think this is where you can start to look at direct mail. I would tell people, again, this is very rough, but probably at this budget level with the size of universes, which is number of voters you're talking to, it's probably about $1 a piece. Work it out with the vendor specifically. Maybe there's ways you can do it cheaper or whatever, or a smaller size card or something like that. But, $1 a piece, you can mail, 2,500 people 4 times or mail 2,500 people twice and do some other social ads. So that's a pretty good thing and something that candidates appreciate. Radio ad, I think your radio starts to come into play here a little bit. And I would focus people on the local radio or like special interest radio that's targeting very specific groups of people. I know there's a lot of kind of ethnic radio stations that are really great. And what I like about those is that those are like high propensity voters in my experience, and it's usually not very expensive to advertise on them. And by the way, the stations love it too, and might create some goodwill for your candidates. But I would look at radio in this category too, something pretty inexpensive. Again, digital ads, ballparking here. It's going to cost you about 50 cents to target each one you want to target. So again, you can be highly targeted and focus on neighborhoods, focus on certain groups of people, whatever you want to do. Make sure to include the candidate on that list so they see your ads, so they know you're helping them. So you can crank up those digital ads. And then again, just I'm flagging staff time. Make sure you spend a little more time doing that. So, all right, so let's get through here so we can get through to the hour here and wrap up people, and then folks can stay on if they want to ask questions. So, $25,000, then you're talking about multiple pieces in a race. That's when, in my mind, ideally, if you're doing independent expenditures, you're doing 2 to 3 mail pieces. $25,000 is going to let you do those 3 mail pieces in a race. You can do a radio ad with larger audiences. You can use digital ads and add a video component, which makes the digital ads more effective. And then time, of course, is increasing. So, Christian, I'm still at like a 2 to 3 race focus here, though. I think it's still better to do more in a few races as your budget goes up, not less in more races.
I couldn't agree, especially if your goal is to get someone elected, right? Like, there's a different approach if you're trying to do a messaging campaign than get involved in a number of races, but we're really focusing on getting someone elected. This is the way to spend money, especially at $25,000. Like where I would lean in here as well is when you have $25,000 and you're also a membership-based organization, that's a nice budget to get some really good canvassing going on. And it's up to everyone's discretion on what would be more effective, right? Like right now with COVID, you can't knock on doors. So you really have to lean into the mail. You have to lean into the digital ad. the one thing I don't know about radio ads, because I haven't done them in a while, is can you target? Like, can you target on Pandora and Spotify? Can I give them a list of people of like, hey, I want them to get the message?
Absolutely.
So I think that would be highly effective. So yeah, and also just for note, like even in the medium-sized raise, like $25,000, it's funny. Once you get into like the 50, 100, and multiple $100,000, you have much more stay over strategy, and you have much more decision-making power, but you also have much more blame that goes into it. And when you're in that, 10 to like 50,000 range, a candidate and a partnership and a coalition table really value with almost no blame. They really just thankful for you to like come in and be a part of it and take a lane. And so especially at $25,000, that really allows you the budget to really take on a demographic, a section of the city or district. So this is a really interesting budget area to be in.
So we'll wrap up here with 50,000. 50,000 really gets you into the bigger things. Like you can do cable or streaming television. I think that's more of something you can do. Network is still out of reach, but in most groups like ours won't do network TV, but you can be active in a wider selection of races. This is when you're starting to look at a broader field of races. You're also reaching a more broad group of voters. So 50,000 plus has really put you in the ballpark of where you can be, like you said, a lot more sophisticated. So let's wrap up and take questions. I appreciate we went a whole hour. I swear I practiced this and I thought we'd keep it short. Actually, I told Christian this one would be short, and we're obviously far from that. So if you have to hop off, we understand. We'll go ahead and take a few questions though. And Christian, I think on your end, you got to use the questions because I can't look at them.
Absolutely.
So why don't we, so again, I apologize folks that we're at the hour. Thanks for being part of it. And we'll tackle a couple questions here, spend a couple minutes and then keep going.
Yeah, it's interesting. One thing we didn't touch upon, and I think it's, again, because we're not in that budget yet, is once you start breaking that $50,000 mark, and again, depending on the size of the race, we're talking about polling, we're talking research, all these things that are almost at the forefront before we get invested in a race rather than, being a part of a coalition. And I think when you look at any of these things, again, always ask yourself, what is the unique value at? Is there a part of the district that you are more well-respected? Is there a demographic you're more respected with? Being able to make that analysis really makes sure that every dollar you spend is the wise one.
Gotcha. So do we have anything for questions, or should we wrap up?
I think we're good on questions.
Okay. Well, we really appreciate you participating. Again, apologize for going long here today, but hope this was helpful. We'll continue we're posting these on YouTube, so you'll have a chance to watch them after the fact, and you can rewatch or share them with other people. And we're always open for questions. You can email us, or you can also go to our Twitter accounts and send us a note. I'm trying occasionally to post some things about different political news that I'm seeing to help people kind of take observations from the political world that they can apply. So with that, Christian, sounds good. We'll see you next week. We'll talk about our views on political tactics and what are some good ones, what are some bad ones.
Talk soon.
All right.